All right, so we'll move on to the final question then. How do New Zealand organisations maximise the opportunities from DevOps and Bimodal IT?
I'd say come and talk to us, we can help.
Yeah, okay. Putting that blatant plug aside.
Yeah. Cut to the chase, Herman.
Yeah.
As always.
Yeah.
Hey.
I think the key thing is, I think the mode 1, mode 2 model is useful in recognising and maybe helping people understand the IT department, and setting mode 2 as a desired state to move to, and as part of that, having a robust DevOps capability to be able to move from mode 1 to mode 2.
Yeah.
So I think it gives people a framework, and to say, okay, in I don't know, 3 years' time or whatever their objective is, can we be essentially a mode 2 operation, and set that as almost an aspirational place to be? Because I think the advantages of being able to operate in that sort of agile capability and be optimized, globally optimized, to deliver the most value as quickly as you can for the whole organization is an admirable objective, as opposed to just trying to be the most efficient IT department, or to just be or the most just keep costs down, which often is an emphasis, because so many, I think, organizations have so much they have to spend so much every year to keep their mode 1 systems running. And it's like going tramping and putting rocks in your pack, it slows you down, and you've got less and less money available to do the mode 2 type stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my feeling is that I definitely see some organisations that are doing what you just said, Bill. They're essentially transitioning everything towards the responsive and fast turnaround end of the spectrum, to the mode 2 stuff, if you like, but making that the system of record, doing that end-to-end thing.
Yeah.
But that's an ongoing journey for an organisation, and they've got to stay sharp around, they've got to address the technical debt and the types of things, that sort of the fluff that builds up in systems, and they've got to do that actively. Whereas, again, not naming any names or anything, but my experience is that there are a lot of organisations that are going the other direction. Essentially, it's an accretive effect around their mode 1 systems. Something comes in, and at one point it's fast and responsive, but then at some point it sort of gets added and stabilised, or becomes, people move on, stuff changes, and then it becomes brittle, and you put a wrapper around it, you don't touch it, and it stopped being able to be responsive, or it just becomes an overhead and adds to the dog pile.
It's almost like it's like a comfort zone, isn't it?
Yeah, and then as Bill says, the resources spent on standing still just keep on going up.
Yeah, and somehow, and I think Bill is right. As a framework, it would be great to have that as a plotted journey from today till tomorrow, that says, well, we want to be a mode 1, or from a mode 1 to a mode 2, and in 3 years we'll be there, and here are the things we need to do to get there. And that would be ideal. But I don't think there's many that will be actually really thinking that way just yet.
Well, for some commercial outfits, where it's just an imperative, and sure. They, depending on their market and their positioning and so on. I mean, there are commercial organisations where that's probably not a big deal quite yet, but there are some that have already died because they haven't competed, exactly. as you said, and there are many others for whom where they've got to make that shift sooner rather than later. But there are organisations where there is no commercial imperative, and where the benefits of moving at their core level to a mode 2 are quite different. Maybe they're not do or die.
No, the motivational factors for those organisations need to be cranked up into something that makes it worthwhile doing for them. Whether it is publicity or whether it is some other driver that who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it the relevant technologies? Yeah, absolutely. Is it something that we should be involved in? Absolutely. Is there something we could help these people wake up, these organizations wake up? I think everyone should. And as I said to begin with in this final question, we can help with those discussions by bringing out the Gartner material and showing the modes that exist, and maybe waking people up and saying, hey, you should really move from here to here because of these reasons.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I don't think they were asleep. I think it's recognised actually, and the problem is known.
Hard to change,
but it's not an easy problem, because effectively, you've got these legacy systems that are very, very old, very complex. People don't understand them, but you can't take the risk of them, going down sometimes, for an hour, because they could be 24/7 systems or whatever. It's a very, very tough problem.
I think I agree, Bill, and I would just say that there are clearly a lot of the examples that we've picked around the Mode 2 organisations, the Facebooks, etc., they're brand new organisations. They've started that way. It's a completely different prospect for an organisation that's got IT systems 30 years or whatever it is. That's a much harder proposition.
And it's almost it's natural entropy problem, whereby systems, even if you don't touch them, suffer entropy just because of these aren't skills available to maintain it or whatever. And it is I think a recognised problem, and it's we sort of talk about moving systems from mode 1 to mode 2, but the architecture of those systems have to support that. To be able to do that sort of stuff, it has to be built for testability in mind, and to retrofit. It's almost impossible actually to retrofit like automated unit testing and stuff onto an application that wasn't built to easily support it.
That's if you've even got access to the source code.
That's even more scary.
Lots and lots of systems out there are off the shelf in one form or another, and you're not able to do anything to fix them at that level.
Yeah.
One of the things you said, Bill, organisations building their capability in DevOps to help them move towards a Mode 2 operation. What recommendations do you have for organisations that are looking to increase their capability in DevOps? Where do they start? What do they do?
Right. Okay. I think that book, Continuous Delivery, describes it well. It talks about basically the pipeline. And you essentially have to, they talk about from the time, in the ideal world, in the ideal DevOps world, from the time code is checked in, you have this automation around, automatically running a unit test, automatically creating, the deployment data, running test scripts, doing all the stuff to the point where it's actually at the other end of the pipeline, it's actually deployed into production and is ready to use.
Sure.
Now you can't, the only way you can, as I see it, is you can just have to essentially start at the beginning of that whole process and move the automation and the process, because there may be processes in there that are manual or only some person knows, and even before you can automate anything you need to really understand it, because you've got to, maybe it's documented, maybe it's not, but essentially you move the automation further and further along that pipeline, and it's gradually, it doesn't have to be overnight. But that's when you've got, I guess, the true DevOps pipeline. What happens from the time code is checked in, as a developer makes a change, to the time something is, deployed into production, ready to go, and I guess that ties into be able to move through that pipeline, if you like, smaller increments of business value, functionality or change, going through that pipeline at a very fast rate.
So time to value, if you like, from a business thing, a business idea, which is validated, to it's out there realizing value or not, and it might be an experimental sort of thing.
Sure.
If it realizes value, keep it. If it doesn't, change it. But your cycle time for that changes from 6 months or a year or whatever it is, to days or maybe at the higher end of the spectrum, weeks. But not much more than that.
So that covers off the process side of it. What about people structure side of it? Is there considerations there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, in the mode 1 model, this pipeline isn't a pipeline. There's like stuff happening on one side of a wall, and there's
it's
stuff
a
happening on
wall.
the other side. It's a wall, and they're saying,
Like
okay, yeah, and the two
like
sides may be optimized.
Like Pink Floyd's wall.
Yeah.
Big wall.
Yeah. So, and what happens is that the development try to optimize around doing development, and even worse than that. Well, not worse than that. You get even the disciplines within the project optimizing. The BAs optimizing what they do,
Sure.
the architects, developers, designers optimizing what they do, the testers optimizing around doing good testing, then the DevOps people, or the operations people rather, optimizing around what operations do. And for them to optimize in terms of just operations, it's more optimal for them to get fewer bigger releases. It's more if we only have to do a release once every 6 months as opposed to once every month, that optimizes their resources. But what it's not doing is optimizing the flow of value through the whole thing, and that's where the DevOps comes in. So structurally, that's where the structure change has to occur. Not development and operations, but DevOps.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that.
You're starting to talk. I mean, lots of organisations who find them that they're completely separated physically. So there's a floor or an area of the building where ops is, or even a different building. Whereas you're probably talking co-location and cross-teaming, and eventually completely blurring the distinction.
Yeah, the collaboration down the toilet, right?
Well, it could even be different organisations, couldn't it, Peter?
Yeah.
Or sometimes it is. In the case of outsourcing and so on. So, with some of the arrangements that are in place around things like outsourcing, I don't know what the answer is there, because what you've put in place then is a whole set of legal structures, or contractual structures between the change and run.
And that's a difficult problem, but I think it comes down ultimately to trust. And if you could trust your vendor, your operations side, if they understand the way you want to operate and they buy into a DevOps type of operation, a member of that team could be on your site. And this really comes back to a lot of agile principles around co-location, clear communication, the team, shared responsibility, and self-managing team, and all those sorts of things, and essentially trust. But contracts are interesting because often contracts are structured around the thing that you almost don't trust the other person.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So. We're probably coming towards the end and time to close out. Is there any last comments from anyone on the call that you'd like to mention before we finalise this?
Yeah, I don't know. Herman mentioned a book. There's a couple of sort of like reference books and places where there's a lot of information happening in the space and worth reading. I think you mentioned the Phoenix project. Was that Herman? You mentioned that. That's an interesting thing to read. I think another one is the Lean Startup, which is another a good thing to get a taste of the sort of leading edge in the space. I think I mentioned the book, the Continuous Delivery book. I can't remember the author's names, but that sort of goes into quite a bit of technical detail around how. Oh, there you go. There's the Lean Startup.
The lean mindset.
Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting thinking, going on. I don't know if you guys got other references. Oh yeah, the lean mindset. There you go. Yeah. So I mean, we've sort of been reading up and and researching and applying the stuff in a number of our projects and things we work on. But there's hundreds probably of books. But sifting through this and pulling out the gems and the key themes. Is there any other things you'd add, Peter? Around things you've read or resources that you think are important in this space?
No, not specifically. I think it's just got to be. It's got to be a good thing to shorten cycle times and to essentially iterate. And if that has to be in a small part of an organisation, so be it. But if the organisation as a whole is to be responsive, then you need that digitisation to the core and the ability to iterate at a top level, at an organisational level.
Sure.
Right. I like that phrase.
I think it's got to be good.
It's a long journey. It's a long journey.
Yeah. And I like that phrase. What do you think? Digitisation to the core. I think we should patent that. I like it.
Anything more from you, Herman, before we close out?
No, thanks. I've already had my my cheeky comment earlier.
All right. Well, then, thank you, everyone,
Thanks, Brendon.
for participating.
Brendon.
It was a good discussion.